Hey, this is Mr. Stein again for Spring Into Math 6, and today we're going to classify triangles. Okay, let's jump into it. First, we're going to classify triangles by angles. Now, when we classify a triangle according to its angles, we're looking at the angles inside the triangle. I know that's kind of a new concept, but we're looking inside the triangle now for its angles. We will be using the number of degrees in these angles to classify the triangle. All right, so one thing to notice about a triangle is that the three angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. I know it seems weird, but it's true. All right, now what are the four kinds of triangles? And remember, we're talking about based on the angles. So the first one is a right triangle. We talked about that in the last lesson with the right angle, but now we're talking about a right triangle. So a right triangle is a triangle that has one right angle and two acute angles. So one of these angles in the triangle measures 90 degrees, hence the right angle, and the other two angles are less than 90 degrees. If you make a right angle, there's no other way but to have two acute angles anyway. So once you see that right angle, no matter what the triangle looks like, you know it's a right triangle. And you can see here I have a picture of a right triangle, and as I alluded to in the last lesson, oftentimes it won't tell you the degrees for the right triangle because that little square sign symbolizes 90 degrees. So you can see here I have 90 degrees and I have 45 and 45. And if you were to add them all up, it equals 180 like I had talked about before. All right, now the next one's a little bit of a tricky one. This one is called equiangular triangle. Now, I know, don't get it confused with equilateral. This one's equiangular because they're equal angles, excuse me. So if you look at the word equiangular, and I know that's a tongue twister, you will see that the word equal is right in the word. So this means that all three of the angles in an equiangular triangle are equal. So let's look at this one. So in this triangle, all of the angles are actually equal. They're all 60 degrees. And I can put a little line here and that will symbolize that they're all equal. So if you were to add the 60 plus 60 is 120, and 120 plus 60 is 180, excuse me. All right, the third type is an acute triangle. The definition of acute triangle is in the name acute. All three angles of the triangle are less than 90 degrees, which makes them acute. So let's take a look at one. So you can see here I have 80 degrees, 33 degrees, and 67 degrees. And if you were to add them all up, it still equals 180, but none of the angles are 90 degrees or greater, so it's an acute triangle. All right, our last type that we're going to talk about with angular triangles, excuse me, with angles being the precursor to why we call them this, it's an obtuse triangle. And an obtuse triangle has one angle that is obtuse or greater than 90 degrees, and two angles that are less than 90 degrees or that are acute. So you have if you have one obtuse angle in a triangle, it's going to be an obtuse triangle. So if you see here in my example, I have my obtuse angle of 130 degrees, and then I have my two acute angles of 25 degrees. And if I were to add them all up again, 25 plus 25 is 50, 50 plus 130 is 180 degrees. All right, now let's classify triangles by sides. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about is an equilateral triangle, kind of like that equiangular triangle, but this time we're talking about it's based on sides. So you can probably guess that an equilateral triangle has side lengths that are all the same size or equal. All right, so you see here my equilateral triangle, and if you notice, you're going to see these little lines that go through each side. Anytime you see a line that goes through it and you see one line, and one line, it's saying that they're all the same. And we'll talk about how that's different in some of the other triangles, and I'll draw those in a second. All right, the next type is called a scalene triangle. A scalene triangle is a triangle where all the side lengths are different. So let's look at this. So you can see here, and I'm going to add these lines to really show you what I meant last time. So this line is different than this one, and that side is different from this side. So you can see that all three side lengths are totally different. Now, if I actually had a ruler and can demonstrate it for you, you would see that there really are three different lengths of sides. And so I symbolize that by different amount of tally marks showing that they're not the same size. All right, let's look at an isosceles triangle. An isosceles triangle has two side lengths that are the same and one side length that is different. All right, now isosceles, I can say I have this side's the same as this side, which is different than the bottom of the triangle. So again, I use my tally marks to symbolize that the two side lengths are equal and one side length is different, making it a nice isosceles triangle. All right, now let's find the unknown angle measure of given triangles. And again, I love this part of it. This part of geometry is really fun. Now, you know that the sum of the angles of a triangle is equal to 180 degrees. So, what happens if you know two but not all three of the measures of the triangle? How can we figure out what the measure of the missing angle actually is? So, you can figure out the missing angle measure by writing the equation and subtracting it from 180. Kind of like what we did with supplementary and complementary angles. And really would be supplementary if we're talking about 180. All right, so let's look at this example. I have 55 degrees, I have a right angle, which is going to be 90, and then I have a missing angle measure, which is symbolized by x. So I would just simply set up an equation. I'd have 90 degrees, or 90 plus 55 plus x equals 180. Then I would have 145 plus x equals 180. Then if I just subtracted 180 minus 145 would give me 35. So 35 is my missing angle measure. So you're just basically taking all of your numbers, adding them up, and then subtracting what you have from 180, and that's going to give you your missing number. All right, that's going to do it. When you guys do this practice later, take your time. It's really not that hard. See you next time.